Hundreds of mourners gathered at a candlelight vigil tonight to honor the 17 students and teachers who lost their lives in the South Florida school shooting. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jim Reed.
I'm Emily Spain. NBC's Wendy Woolfolk is in Parkland, Florida with the latest on the emotional vigil.
Another attack on a school, a community, a nation.
The shooter's social media is alleged to have many references of his plans to carry out the attack.
Today, the gunman appeared in court for the first time. Cruz is charged with 17 counts of premeditated murder and being held without bond. He remains silent in the courtroom. The motive for the shooting rampage remains unclear. Police say he was expelled from the school last year. At our nation's capital, gun control was put on center stage today. Many senators want change. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, whose community was rocked by Sandy Hook, Connecticut, said Americans should be working to fix this, and if they aren't, they're an accomplice. Senator Marco Rubio also spoke.
There's not an easy proposal out there, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to find one.
President Trump tweeted earlier pointing to mental health. He also spoke and offered words of comfort. He's making plans to visit the community in the coming days. He was already scheduled to spend time this weekend in Florida.
In the wake of the high school shooting in Florida, the conversation about gun control is as relevant as ever. KOMU8's Daytona Everett tells us what that means for one group in opposition and for legislators on the other side.
Yeah, that's right, Emily. About a year ago, Moms Demand Action marched at the Capitol to raise awareness on what they see as dangerous bills on gun control. One's just like House Bill 1936. The group calls it a guns everywhere. Dorman himself sponsors a different bill concerning faculty having guns on campus. He thinks it will help with the safety of students. Elementary and secondary teachers already have that option here in Missouri. That bill just passed a House committee too. In the studio, Daytona Everett, KOMU8 News.
As the Florida shooting details unfold, parents might wonder how to talk about the tragedy with their kids. Children often see traumatic events on TV and social media. Psychologists say it's important to talk with kids and give them a chance to ask questions.
When there's been trauma, one of the things that children look to us as parents for is support, guidance, and reassurance. It's really critical that the parent is able to reassure the child that they're safe.
Experts say parents should try to limit a child's exposure to violence. One method is limiting kids watching traumatic events on TV.
Here's what's happening right now. A Boone County jury is headed home after it couldn't come up with a verdict in an arson case. About an hour ago, the judge said the jurors were stuck. James Hall was accused of accepting money to burn down a home on Rock Quarry Road in December of 2014. An 87-year-old woman was asleep inside. She was hurt but survived. Prosecutors say the man who paid him was Columbia businessman Mehrdad Futuhayan, who wanted the woman's property. Nearly a dozen people took the stand to testify against Hall. KOMU8's Claire Kopsky was in court and joins us now here in the studio with the details.
The prosecuting attorney presented more evidence this afternoon linking Futuhayan and Hall. The one witness confirmed evidence that links the two men. One of the investigators on the case also confirmed they found Futuhayan's business card when they arrested Hall. The attorney's closing arguments summed up the sentiments from the day.
And he didn't do anything that scared her before the fire. So as to the why, we don't have any evidence on the why. So I would ask you to find James Hall not guilty because as you deliberate, I believe you will have reasonable doubt.
You need to send people a message that isn't going to be tolerated here in Boone County. That is not how we treat our elderly. That's not how we treat anyone. That isn't how we would treat a dog. Find him guilty.
Less than an hour ago, the judge dismissed the jurors and declared a mistrial. The judge said in a few days he'll make a decision on the next steps. In the studio, Claire Kopsky, KOMU8 News.
Well, the weather was definitely warmer today, but how is the rest of the week shaping up? Let's send it over to Kenton for a check of the forecast.
Kenton, thank you very much. Columbia voters are reacting to 4 polling locations closing for the April municipal election. That's coming up. Kenton, thank you very much. Coming up, Missouri's lack of public defenders leads to creative solutions. That's next.
Welcome back. Candidates for the Jefferson City Board of Education met earlier this evening to answer questions at a public forum. Candidates Michael Coute, Pam Murray, Lindsay Rowden, and Ken Inlow are all vying for 2 open seats on the board. Rowden was the only candidate not at the forum tonight. The 2 open seats are both 3-year terms. Each of the candidates was excited for the opportunities that the forum presented.
To address the kinds of issues that people are concerned about, that's a great thing.
It gives me an idea of what are some of the top issues on their minds.
I think forums are a tremendous opportunity for the public to view the candidates.
Candidates were asked questions by the audience regarding teacher salaries, security in schools, and student drug use. The Jefferson City Board of Education will be on the ballot in April.
The Boone County Clerk announced the closing of 4 polling sites for the municipal election in April. That has drawn criticism. 2 of the polling sites, Oak Tower and Paquin Tower, house more than 350 residents who are elderly or disabled. The Columbia Disability Commission says by closing these polls, the county clerk is creating barriers against hundreds of voters.
They have more difficulty getting out to other polling places than the average citizen. And I don't know what problem is being solved by taking away the polling places of 2 densely packed, high-rise facilities of people with disabilities and senior citizens.
The clerk says he will take the concerns into consideration for the future. Both locations will be reopened for the primary and general elections later this year.
Missouri Supreme Court asked for additional funding from the Budget Committee as well today. The court wants to increase funding for Missouri's drug and treatment courts. Currently, the High Court says those courts are only funded at about 20% of what they need. The clerk says the drug courts provide a better alternative to the Department of Corrections.
When people are in drug courts, they're not being sent to the Department of Corrections. They're able to keep their jobs, they're able to keep their families together. And so there are cost savings that are associated with drug courts. It is a cheaper way to treat the people with problems rather than sending them to the Department of Corrections.
The Supreme Court acknowledged Missourians who go through drug courts are significantly less likely to get in trouble again.
300, that's how many public defenders Missouri is short to provide, quote, competent representation. Right now, the American Bar Association recommends public defenders spend 47 hours with their clients. In Missouri, you barely get 9 hours. The Public Defender's Office is also the second lowest paid in the country. This lack of attorneys is leading the office to some creative solutions.
Yesterday, we actually had an hour-and-a-half discussion because the only applicant for one of our offices was a licensed attorney in Illinois who's got a DWI and doesn't have the ability to drive. And so we had a discussion on how to get him to court. These are the kinds of...
According to Barrett, the lack of attorneys is causing defendants to wait in jail longer than necessary before trial.
It appears immigration reform could be in trouble as the U.S. Senate failed to pass any amendments today. There were 4 in total, but none got the necessary 60 votes. One of the failed proposals would have built a border wall, restricted legal immigration, and extended citizenship to almost 2 million DACA recipients.
There's only one reason why the Senate will be unable to reach a bipartisan solution to DACA: President Trump. President Trump created this problem by terminating the DACA program last August. Since that decision, President Trump has stood in the way of every single proposal that could become law.
House Speaker Paul Ryan has said he will only allow a vote on legislation that the president will support.
Coming up in sports, a father and son on the same coaching staff creates a close family atmosphere.
But it's a tragic event before the season that has the entire Central Methodist basketball family closer than ever. A Swiss snowboarder took center stage today after coming in 5th in the men's halfpipe a few days ago. Pat Bergener is also a professional singer back home and entertained his teammates and crowds at the House of Switzerland in Pyeongchang. He released 2 singles and played the harmonica and the guitar. His set was met with plenty of cheers from the audience. Now here's a look at what we're following on KOMU 8 News 10 o'clock. We're learning new details about the timeline of the Florida shooting suspect.
The shooter was able to escape police for almost an hour. That's coming up at 10 o'clock. Kenton.